Hallo und herzlich willkommen zum Fliegermagazin-Podcast, dem Podcast von Piloten für Piloten in der allgemeinen Luftfahrt. Ich bin Thomas Borchert, Chefredakteur des Fliegermagazins. Mehr über unser Heft erfahren Sie unter www.fliegermagazin.de/shop. In dieser 15. Folge des Fliegermagazin-Podcasts, zu der ich Sie sehr herzlich begrüße, setzen wir unsere kleine Serie fort, bei der wir mit den Herstellern der großen Navigations-Apps für Piloten sprechen. Wir haben heute Rob Hart von SkyDemon zu Gast und weil der nur Englisch spricht, wechseln wir auch gleich in diese Sprache. Hello Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, it's nice to be with you.
So SkyDemon is always considered to be a little bit of the little guy in the navigation app arena. How big is SkyDemon exactly and where are you based?
So we're based in a town called Frome in the southwest of England. And in terms of our size of our company, we're actually, I think, smaller than many people would imagine. Actually, we only have 4 main staff. So we are very small. I think a lot of people expect us to have a massive team, but really we're just very efficient. So yes, that's
but
it.
4 is really surprising. I mean, do you also work with freelancers, or is it really 4 people that do all the programming, the data, and everything that you need to do to keep the app running?
Sure. So basically, we have a distribution of work. We have one software developer who is the owner of the company. He's the sole owner. So he does all of the business decisions and the software development work. We have one lady who is entirely dedicated to creating and maintaining the chart data. And then there is me and my sister Hannah. We tend to handle the kind of customer interface side of things. So, the sales and marketing, the user support, things like that. So, yeah. And then if there's anything unusual that nobody knows whose desk it should be on, it lands on mine.
Okay. SkyDemon started in the UK. You're still based in the UK. But how important a market is Germany and the German-speaking countries for SkyDemon?
It's incredibly important, and I think that everybody knows that in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, what I would call the Germanic countries. There's so much flying that goes on in so many different types. And of course, it's the center of Europe. So you have pilots flying in and out from the west and from the east. So I think, it's definitely the main country for aviation in Europe. And with Austria and Switzerland as well, it's a big area that's really important to us. I often say that visiting the Aero in Friedrichshafen is, it's our most important event each year. It's just so great to come into Europe and see how pilots are flying and to meet everybody. So yeah, Germany hugely important.
And is the UK, is Great Britain still bigger in terms of market share, or is that kind of equal?
I would say that the UK is bigger for market share, but probably that's because it's our home territory. We're very, very well known in the UK, and I think in Germany, we turned up a little bit after guys like AirNav Pro, but we've stuck around and we're constantly growing it. I think it will maybe be a year or two before it's about the same. But yeah, it's certainly growing fast.
What about the other European countries? Like France is certainly also a big general aviation country.
Well, I would say that in France, we are less dominant there, actually. I think there's a number of factors in play in France in particular, but then when you move up into Belgium, the Netherlands, we have really good penetration there. Also in Scandinavia, I get the impression that the guys in Sweden and Norway and Finland maybe get left out of Europe a little bit, but I really like dealing with those countries. And even though there's not as many pilots there as maybe in Germany or in France, we do very well in those countries.
Looking at SkyDemon, there's certainly several things that set it apart from comparable apps, and I'll ask you in a moment what you think are the main things, but two come to my mind.
Sure.
One being, you're one of the apps that does not use the big data provider that many other people use, namely Jeppesen.
Yes.
But you collect your own data and assemble your own data. How does that work? Because it seems from Jeppesen being such a big company that the process is enormous and elaborate. But apparently you make do with one person, as you just said.
Yeah, I think it is a difficult challenge. And I can certainly understand that there are lots of companies in aviation who would look at the scope of that challenge and say, do you know what, it's going to be just more cost effective for us to go to Jeppesen and license their data sets. But in our experience, when we have used third-party data sets in the past, in the very early days of SkyDemon, that in itself poses a lot of challenges. If you discover there is some kind of concern or problem with the data, the thing for us, being such a small and lean and nimble team, for us, if we can't just solve a problem right away, it creates a big headache for us. So because we're this kind of small and agile company, we really, really value being able to respond quickly to any problems and concerns.
And you just did, right? I mean, there was some trouble in German aerospace with special areas that were announced in a specific way that is not the standard way around the northern German Wittmund and Rügen areas, and you were very, very fast and nimble to depict those in the chart in SkyDemon.
And that's a great example of an area where, instead of us saying it's somebody else's problem, it's the data provider's problem, we look at this and we say, we can do something about this right now. Let's just do it. Let's just get it done. Yeah. And I think that's, I think we get a lot of, shall I say, mileage out of our ability to respond to things fast. And that's one major benefit of not buying third-party data. Of course, in some cases, we are forced to use extra data. So, for example, in Austria, you have only a very small number of airfields in the AIP. For us to get a bigger picture in Austria, we speak to Rogers Data. And they obviously have a more in-depth flight guide. So to some extent, we will build as much data as we can using our own knowledge, but we're also not so arrogant to believe that we know everything, and we are not so proud that we will not ask an expert for more guidance. So there's a balance, I think, but we're doing that balancing act every day.
On the other hand, something that some people say then is that the quality assurance and control process cannot be as elaborate when you do it yourself with only a small staff. But frankly, I have yet to meet a pilot that got into trouble using a data set from SkyDemon and that didn't contain some airspace that the other guys had.
Indeed. Well, actually, from our side, because we are not able to just pass any responsibility for data quality back to Jeppesen, because we have to take that responsibility from ourselves. I think that maybe our own practices that we've created are maybe even a little too conservative. We have many, many checks and balances that we've developed over the years. Every time we discover a problem in our data, and it does happen sometimes, we immediately sit down, all of our team together in a meeting, and try to understand how this could have happened. Can we think about some countermeasures that we could put in place for the future? And I think that over time, our practices have grown to the point where some people may be cautious of us as a small company, but for the guys who've actually used us, I think they have justified trust in us. And over time, I think all pilots will see where we're coming from as being a positive thing.
Another thing that seems to be a benefit of doing it yourself is that you have a lot more countries covered than many other app providers have. I think you fully cover Africa and some of the more exotic countries, also in much more detail than others do. I did a flight to Morocco 2 years ago now, and you had all the VFR flyways in your database, whereas other apps did not.
Indeed. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that because we're not dealing with Jeppesen, we are dealing with the AIS units of each country directly and building a personal relationship with the operators there. So in the case of Morocco, it's actually really cool. We discovered a problem with their AIP, I think some years ago now.
Uh-huh.
And we let them know about it, as we always do. If we discover a problem, it's not our responsibility to fix the AIP data. We recognize our responsibility. So we contacted Morocco AIS. And in the end, they came back to us and said, thank you for letting us know. In future, can we send you our proposed changes? Can we give you this can we have more of a direct relationship? So not only we're feeding you data, but you guys are kind of giving some kind of feedback on the quality and how it's expressed to the user.
One of the other things that's definitely different in SkyDemon is that I believe from the very start, you only offered what's called a vector chart. So a chart that is SkyDemon's own proprietary format and that is drawn on the screen so that even when you do track up and fly southbound, all the annotations on that chart are right side up, not upside down. Whereas many other apps offer at least the possibility to buy digitized ICAO charts, as they are called in Germany. I think in the UK they are called half-mil charts, and superimpose those on the moving map. Why did you make the decision to not even offer that option?
Well, I think that's a good question. To some extent, it's not just about the visibility of the chart and the readability of it that's a concern here. I mean, obviously, for us, our opinion is that the paper chart that shows everything from the ground up to, say, flight level 195 becomes a real mess, and it's sometimes really difficult to read it. And our kind of perspective is that we don't want people to be looking at our product and to be confused or unsure of what they're looking at. And we just found that every time we were looking at the CAA chart or any ICAO charts, that it was not a good user experience. User experience is really important for us. But then also there are certain functionalities within our software which really rely on the vector mapping. So when you're flying along, SkyDemon is not just showing you the paper chart. It also has an understanding in its software about this 3D complex model of airspace, and it can look ahead from your position and interrogate this complex model in a way that's just not possible with a paper chart. So we kind of feel that the raster, the fixed scale chart, actually cripples functionality in software and to some extent is a backward step. So that's our general feeling. Of course, when it comes to visual approach charts or airfields, ground documents, we can see some value there in overlaying those on top of our vector model. So indeed, and hence we do. So that's it for us. Like I mentioned before, there's a balancing act between giving the user what they already expect from the market and giving them what they want, balancing that against when the user is wanting something just because they've used it before or just because it's in another product, if us including it does not solve some problem somewhere, then we are very wary about including it. So yeah,
Personally, I couldn't agree more. I do not at all like raster charts and digitized images of ICAO charts, but I think especially German pilots, correct me if I'm wrong, are very hung up on using ICAO charts, are very used to ICAO charts, and many of them have a desire to have them displayed on their moving map.
Indeed, and this is a criticism that I hear sometimes. Yeah, we found that some guys were just too hung up on their paper charts. So we created the DFS chart style. So it's the same underlying chart data, but we just changed the colors so that it appeals and it appears more friendly.
One of the things I noticed is that the vector chart that SkyDemon offers has just the right amount of detail for VFR flying. So
Yes.
There's enough of place names and lake names and roads and railroads and all that stuff to really make it useful for VFR navigation, and also to answer that passenger question, what's that city over there, which always comes up. Whereas other app providers struggle enormously with getting more detail into their vector background charts. What's so hard about that, and what is your secret that you have mastered it?
So the thing that we must always be concerned about, I think, as the pilots, must be thinking about the possibility of information overload. And so one of the things that we do as part of our development process is that when we integrate something like some new map item, we prototype it, we put it on the screen, and then everybody in the office just takes a bit of a look, and you get a feeling. When you look at something, is it busy? If I'm looking at one particular area of the map, am I able to extract the information I'm looking to extract? And if I am, how easy was it? So, I think that there is an extra layer in our development, which is to not just glance over it to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to, but to look at it in more detail and you make an assessment about how it feels to look at. And if it doesn't feel good, maybe we change the size of some texts, maybe we kind of change the boldness of a symbol until we're happy with it. So yeah, we come back to the idea of user experience and us doing our best to judge how the user will feel when they're accessing something in SkyDemon. Yeah.
Does one have to be a pilot to make that judgment? Or in other words, how many of the 4 people in the office are pilots?
So Tim is the boss. He has a pilot's license, but I think that he has not flown for many years now. Louise, our data lady, she is a pilot. I think she still flies. I have only done a couple of hours of basic training, so I don't have my license, and neither has Hannah. So
how
yeah.
do you get the practical aspects of the app right? I mean, do you have a kind of a group of pilots that you have as beta testers, or how does that work?
Yeah, there's certainly a small complement of beta testers who work with us, and we also have some flying friends. But generally speaking, I mean, for these kind of things, to replicate a cockpit environment, it's not so hard. You just have to sit in your chair, and instead of having your elbows, nice and wide, you're having them very close. You just know the physical situations that the pilot is in, as well as that it's noisy. All of these things, and so we can still have a good idea. And of course, then additionally, we're always talking to pilots every day. We get so much feedback. maybe too much sometimes. But we're always getting feedback about a pilot saying, I found this particular aspect of the software difficult because in my aircraft, which is, blah, I have less space on my panel or less space to do this, that, or the other. And so, yeah, we have some common sense in the office, and that backed up by this feedback from real pilots using it every day is very important. Yes.
So I mentioned two things that, to my mind, stand out with regards to SkyDemon. What is your view? What are the three top things that make SkyDemon special?
Well, I mean, that's... I suppose it's really difficult to point at even just three things, because there are many small things that all come together. I think probably the most important thing is the idea that we're always looking for justified trust in our work. We're never looking to take a cheap shortcut, because if we ever try to do something very cheap and try to do things without doing all the proper groundwork, then we run the risk of damaging the trust in our brand and in our product. So we almost always will take the long path of trying to understand a problem, to come up with a good solution to that problem, instead of just implementing a feature because it's in Garmin or something. And actually, our attitude to this is such that we've built many prototypes for features and functions in SkyDemon that have never been released, because we produce them. We do that thing, as I mentioned, where we all sit and look and say, how does this look? How does it feel? Does it solve the problem? And in many cases, the prototype did not meet our expectations internally. And so we will never show them to the customer, because even if there's a large subset of guys who want it, if we're not happy with the way that we're presenting it, we put it on the shelf and we come back to it later when maybe we have a better idea of how to do it. So that's one thing that I think is really important to making SkyDemon successful. And then the other thing is just to focus on clarity. I mentioned information overloads just before. When you're in the cockpit, you just want to be able to work SkyDemon into your scan. So you're looking out of the window, you're glancing down at your instruments, you're glancing down at your tablet to see, am I still roughly where I was expecting to be? Yes, good. And in that small glance, being able to deliver the key data that the pilot is looking for at that time, with us having that as a focus, it's not really a feature, but it is a major component of SkyDemon.
Does that clarity also mean that you restrict yourself or focus yourselves on VFR flying, or will SkyDemon morph into a VFR and IFR app?
I get asked this a lot, and the short answer is that we will always be focused mainly on VFR, or I should never say never. I think it's probably very likely that we will always be VFR focused, but I think you can expect to see every year us taking a little bit of a development cycle to focus on some new elements of some different subset of pilots. So I think that we'll be doing a little more IFR every now and again. I think that recently we had some interesting conversations with some guys from the gliding community here in the UK. To try and see if there's some way that we can make SkyDemon more appropriate to glider pilot use. So I wouldn't say it's strictly VFR, but I certainly wouldn't say that we're going to move away from that main focus, because at the end of the day, it's what we're good at. It's what we're recognized for. And we don't want to try and reinvent the wheel somewhere else just because we've had some success in VFR. We don't want to get too arrogant. and move beyond our expertise.
Some users consider the SkyDemon user interface a little bit dated from the graphics standpoint. Would you agree to that? Are there changes planned?
In terms of the graphics, I would say there aren't really any particular changes planned. I think that we will always move forward with our development in terms of the feel of it and us looking at it internally, looking at the feel. And if over time we start to have that feeling as well, and the feedback like that starts to increase on us, then we will respond to that. The one area that I think we will continue to be making small changes is for the layout of things. So, there's a variety of different scientific studies that talk about where the human eye naturally falls when it lands upon a page, and therefore where to put the highest priority information on a particular screen layout. And we are always very interested to hear about those kind of studies and develop SkyDemon in response. So over the last year, we did do a number of, I would say, small changes that affected the layout of how we're presenting the data. And I think we will continue to make those refinements ongoing. But our focus, is always more on clarity. And I think that if we got to the point where we were not happy with the look, if we felt that it was dated, but the more modern way of doing things, we felt lost clarity, we would probably still tend towards clarity, I think. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you found features in SkyDemon that are kind of more important to German or German-speaking users than they are elsewhere?
I think that not so much. I mean, there are obviously certain elements that are more interesting to some countries than others, depending on how a country uses its visual reporting points. For example, some customers might want them to be more prominent. Some might find them to be irrelevant. I don't think there's anything in particular in Germany that is distinct from the rest of the world. Certainly, in terms of language, Germany provides an interesting challenge for us, because
that's something I wanted to ask. How important is localization to people? So how much does it matter to a German user that all the menus are in German and that everything is translated?
I think it does matter quite a bit. Obviously, English is the main language of aviation, and we all recognize that. But of course, going back to the idea of clarity and being able to quickly identify what's going on the screen, I think a native German speaker will find the meanings of words entering their mind faster if it's in German. And when you're flying in this high-stress situation, those milliseconds of brain processing time are important. So I think that is significant. But I wouldn't say it's the kind of thing that we get a lot of feedback about. From our side, the big challenge is the length of German words sometimes.
Right.
To find the right word that also fits in the space we have for it on the button. And to have that button then appear correctly for all the different screen sizes, ranging from a phone to a big tablet, that's a real challenge for an app developer. It's an ongoing struggle, I think.
Is there any advice for someone just beginning with SkyDemon, what they should look for first, what they should do first, how they should approach the app?
I think that the best approach, and possibly the best approach with any of these kind of apps, is to play with it. I think that we as humans, we learn when we're children by just picking something up and playing with it and seeing what it does. certainly, with any tool, the more you use it, the more proficient you'll become with it. Fortunately, with SkyDemon, we've deliberately designed it to be very simple, so that the first time you open it, it almost is completely intuitive as to what you can do. You select an airfield, another airfield pops up, and then immediately you can tap on it and then drag and adjust your route, view the NOTAMs and view the weather briefing for that route. These are the things that each pilot is, the basics that are very easy to discover.
And one should mention that both weather and NOTAMs are integrated into SkyDemon quite nicely.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I would call our bread and butter. The idea that there's so many different things that the pilot needs to know and to discover about his plan. We want to bring it all together in one place, and yeah, that's an important thing. But then, of course, every pilot is very slightly different in other ways. Does the pilot care about filing a flight plan? Does he care about printing a pilot's log? Does he care about, deep airfield information? I think after about an hour or two of just playing with the software, each individual pilot will discover the things that matter to him. And we've kind of designed the interface so that for the things that he's not interested in, he's not kind of assaulted by many different buttons and options which he doesn't need or have any interest in. So yeah, I would say the key thing for new people is to play with it. Play with it. Plan a fantasy flight that you might never fly in complex airspace that you might never, dare to fly in normally. And you'll discover little things that SkyDemon does. Look, I can easily plan to go under this bit of airspace. Okay, that makes it a little bit easier. Or maybe, SkyDemon will, as you're doing it and as you're planning your route, you'll discover different ways to fly around problems or maybe to test your limits as a pilot. So yeah, there's a lot there that we can use to build confidence and build flying range and help people to get more out of this hobby, which is actually really fun when you take the stress out of it.
Yeah, very, very true, of course. One of the things that SkyDemon excels in, of course, is depiction of NOTAMs on the chart so that you can easily fly around them and see what's in your way.
Yeah, it's certainly very powerful. I think in the UK, when we first did it, it was a completely new idea to draw these things on the map. And actually, we've had some feedback from the UK authorities that, once we started to make it very easy to get a NOTAM briefing and to read it and understand it, and to have it truly be a narrow route NOTAM briefing, only the bits that are relevant for your flight, we started to see an increase in the number of pilots who were actually bothering to read their NOTAMs. Because I think it's human nature that when you're frequently presented with a big list of information and you read through the whole list, and then you discover that actually only 10% of that list was relevant to your flight, the next time you get to that list, the chances are that you won't bother reading it as much. And this is obviously a big problem. Pilots must read NOTAMs to avoid trouble. And I think that by making it easy to get your NOTAM briefing, we have then increased the amount of pilot engagement with those NOTAMs as a result. So yeah, it's had a very positive effect, I think.
Now, since we spoke about someone getting into SkyDemon, how would they go about that? I mean, probably you have a website and you can download a free trial from there, or how does that work?
Exactly correct. So we have our website, www.skydemon.aero. And on that site, it's possible to give us your email address. So we basically start a free trial. We send you a little password, and then you can download the app from the App Store on Android or iPad. For the PC, you can download the software straight from our website. And then the password works in the app for 30 days. So yeah, it's definitely, it's no cost to try it out. And I would always encourage new users to just give it a go.
And if someone has tried already 2-3 years ago or so, just shoot you an email to kind of reset his 30-day trial if he wants to go at it again?
They can just sign up again, just from the same place where you enter your email address. Yeah, it's really easy. Basically, every 6 months or every time we release a new major software version, not like a little minor change, but if we ever go from version 3 to version 4, then everybody's free trials are reset.
I see. Okay. One of the big things that is much discussed, at least, is connecting apps more and more to external devices, be it sensors like traffic sensors or weather download gadgets, stuff like that, or even built-in avionics, panel mount avionics. Is that harder to do for you, for SkyDemon, as someone that does not, build their own panel mount avionics, obviously?
Yeah, there are so many of these external sensor devices. It's to be frank, when it comes to buying the tablet that SkyDemon's running on, making that choice is quite easy. They will all use very standardized ways of communicating with external sensor devices, and in a very standard way with the navigation app. But when it comes to these external devices, there's a lot of complexity in it for us as app developers. We have to be very cautious about what we support. We don't want to throw our weight behind something before the market has recognized it as being interesting. There's obviously a really big drive right now for traffic devices.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And when it comes to these kind of devices, there's a lot of choice. It's actually really difficult for me to recommend any one in particular.
Speaking of hardware, does SkyDemon run better on iOS than on Android, or vice versa?
I mean, better is a relative term. Actually, the difference between an iOS and an Android device in terms of SkyDemon use, the difference is very small. I think that you will, generally speaking, get a slightly faster and smoother experience with iOS, mainly because their operating system and their devices are built in the same house. But we take a lot of time when it comes to the Android development to try to make sure that Android users don't feel like they're second-class citizens. There are some very small technical things, like, for example, in SkyDemon on iOS, you can take 2 fingers and just place them on the screen at the same time to draw a ruler between those 2 points. On Android, you can't do that because the way that Android interprets 2-finger touches is, it's expecting you to be pinching to zoom in and out.
Oh, I see.
So Android just doesn't support that. But then we take a couple of extra steps in our development to say, okay, we create a little menu option that allows the user to draw that ruler with, they make one touch, they say, extend the ruler from here, and then they make another touch, and then they have it.
What does the future hold for SkyDemon and for navigation apps in general? I mean, what are the 1 or 2 big things that are coming up? Maybe even for Aero?
Well, there's obviously so many interesting things on the horizon. When we talk about aviation in the future, we're talking a lot about flight computers making decisions on the behalf of a pilot. We might be talking about autonomous vehicles. And I think there is going to be a big trend towards looking at aviation data and how it's presented, and seeking to present that data in a nice uniform way, regardless of what country it comes from. Because, of course, when a computer is making a decision If there is any ambiguity in the information it's given for making that decision, then the computer just doesn't know what to do. And so when we start to look at automation in aviation, that's going to be a really interesting challenge. I think right now the big new thing the big things that are coming is the sheer number of these external devices that we were talking about. You mentioned traffic and weather, but there's also things like AHARs. There are also things like integrating with a radio, the static system monitoring devices. I think we're going to start to get to the point where we've got too many devices. And that's going to be a real interesting thing, especially for the small cockpit environment. But then also there are other sides of the coin. So when we're obviously doing all of our work, our users use our system. They go flying, and they have the logs for where they went flying. Now, recently in the UK, we've been having a lot of big discussions in grassroots GA about the growth of controlled airspace, and questions being asked, what data are these decisions being made based upon? And so we are exploring currently the possibility of looking at all the flights which have been undertaken in SkyDemon historically, and using that data anonymously, of course, because privacy is important, but using that information to show the real flying habits of pilots who may otherwise not engage with the regulator in the same way that they engage with us. I see companies like ours as being really important for providing good quality data that facilitate good quality strategic decisions by the authorities. And I think that's going to be, we've done some experiments with this so far. I think we recently posted up on our Facebook page a little picture of what it looks like around London on this, what we call the heat map. So there's certainly been some interest by the authorities there, as well as interest by users, because users are interested. If you could print out a nice dark coloured image, but with your flights that you've undertaken all around Germany and all around Europe, coloured in yellow, so that you can see your general flying trends. If you could generate that just from within your SkyDemon, I think you'd be quite pleased and delighted with the result. We made one, and we now have it hanging on the wall in our office.
I can imagine that. Yes,
yeah, it's great office art, I tell you. Yes.
Yep.
So yeah, but I think in that area, in particular, German pilots, in my experience, are much more cautious about privacy.
I tend to agree, yes.
Yes. And so, if any pilots are concerned about this kind of stuff, we recently made a small change, or I should say a clarification to our terms and conditions that talks about the specific ways we might use data that we've collected, and give any users who are concerned about this an opportunity to opt out. Moving forwards, to have positive change and to guide strategic decisions with good quality data must also be balanced out with these privacy concerns. I would hope that at this point we have gained enough trust from our users that they believe that we will treat their data with respect, and that we will use it prudently and judiciously. But this is a big concern, or a big consideration moving forward.
Since Arrow, when this podcast comes out, is less than 2 months away, do you have your booth number already that you could invite people to?
We are again in Hall 6, A6, stand 501.
And will the whole crew be there, all 4 of you?
Louise won't be there, but myself, Hannah, and Tim will be.
I'm looking very much forward to seeing you all at Arrow. Thank you very much, Rob, for being with us at the podcast.
No, it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you too.
Das war der Fliegermagazin-Podcast Nummer 15. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören. Schön, dass Sie dabei waren. Mehr über das Magazin erfahren Sie wie immer unter www.fliegermagazin.de/shop. Bis bald.